My name is Lena Morales. I'm 32. It was a boring Thursday. Not the kind that announces itself with fireworks, just the bland, familiar kind that lets problems creep in wearing sneakers. I was at my desk going through invoices when my phone buzzed with that long, self important vibration that usually meant drama. A text. No hello, no preface, just a demand. I need a new car. Can you cosign? From Hannah. She didn't even add a please. For context, I own my house, I pay my bills, I keep spreadsheets where other people keep feelings. For years, I had been the steady one, the sibling who did the quiet, ugly work of supporting a family that treated loud emotions like currency. Hannah is 28. She's bright, theatrical, and has burned through more jobs than most people collect mugs. She's also very good at crying in public, which in our family reads as evidence that she is the wounded one, and anyone who resists must be in the wrong. I read her message twice, then laughed. A short, irritated sound that surprised me. I typed back, "Keep dreaming." I didn't expect the reply that came 10 minutes later. Not from her, but from Dad. All caps. Refuse, and you're cut off from family events. The ultimatum arrived like a hot coin in my palm. For most people, that text would sting, maybe coil into guilt and apology. For me, it landed like a match thrown on dry kindling. I felt something in me change from tired to cold to very deliberate. There was a shared credit line, something I'd reluctantly agreed to at a Thanksgiving where guilt felt like the only seasoning. I'd signed because everyone's eyes had said the same thing. You're the one with stability, the grown-up, the one who has time to help. They framed it like charity. I framed it like a trap. My sister had maxed that line on a high-end espresso machine she showed off in half a dozen videos, on a coat she posted with filtered close-ups, and on things that warmed her for the moment and left me paying in months. I called the bank, closed it digitally in less than an hour. I watched the confirmation land in my inbox like evidence. I didn't make a speech. I simply removed the safety net they were used to taking for granted. By morning, my phone was a badge of war. 36 missed calls, 12 from Hannah, 9 from Dad, a spattering from cousins, and one aunt who clearly enjoyed being notified. I let them pile up. I didn't answer any. Because this wasn't about a car. It was about the ledger the family had been keeping for years. A ledger that never included me. I had been the designated responsible one. Steady in a household that rewarded drama, the person who paid, fixed, and forgave. They called me calm. They called me reasonable. They called me whatever made it easy to ask me for more. They assumed I would cave like I always had. Except I didn't, not this time. If you want history, let's go back. 3 years earlier, Hannah punctured 2 of my tires because I refused to let her borrow my car for a music festival. She posted a photo of the flattened tires on her story and tagged it with laughing emojis like vandalism was a punchline. When I asked that she pay for the repairs, an ordinary practical ask, they all told me I was overreacting. No apology, no restitution. The message was clear. Keep your mouth shut and plate spinning won't fall. The hair, the dinner, that night is the thing they like to pretend fell out of nowhere. We had been at my parents' place for the holidays after they begged me to come. Midway through dessert, Hannah launched into one of her monologues about how I never supported her dreams. She screamed. She threw her drink in my face. I remember the cold weight of wine on my skin and the sudden, terrifying clarity. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed the scissors on the counter, like a person moving through fog, each movement calm and measured. Came back and cut off a long chunk of the hair she'd obsessed over for years. Silence. Her scream. My mother crying. My father standing like a man who'd had an uncomfortable thought and decided to freeze. And me, oddly calm, like someone who'd finally discovered a buried switch labeled, "Enough." They kicked me out that night. Not for the way she'd thrown wine across a table full of people, but for the way I'd retaliated. I was the one told I'd gone too far. And yet the next morning the world spun as if nothing had occurred. Fast forward to this week. Hannah wrecked the older Camry I'd given her to drive while she found herself. I had transferred neither title nor legal ownership. It had been a loan, a lifeline, and a risk I accepted. She called it her car in posts and wore the indignity of entitlement like an accessory. Then she wrecked it texting and blamed faulty brakes. Not once did she say sorry. Instead, she asked me for a co-signed loan for a brand new car. So I walked through my decision like a small, quiet ceremony. I canceled the shared line. I removed myself from the family chat. I pulled the Camry back into my garage by proxy, not through a messy confrontation, but through the mechanics of control. I hadn't transferred the title, and I had friends in the towing business who were discreet. Hannah called when she saw the driveway empty. I sent her a photo of the Camry in my garage. No words, no flourish, just a picture. It felt like closing a door and discovering the handle had finally warmed to my touch. By noon, the family chat was a battlefield. My mother's message, "Lena, we need to talk ASAP. This isn't like you." I left the chat. Not leave the conversation. Left it entirely, removed. That little action felt like lifting a hand off a hot stove. I could feel some people noticing, the ones who'd been tired of covering for dramatic narratives. My cousin Jake, the one who sees things and doesn't let them slide, called and said, "Maybe it's time someone put Hannah in her place." That was the first time in years I felt seen, not pitied, not urged to fix, just recognized. A day later, a note was slipped under my windshield. Childish handwriting, petty, grow up. I didn't bother to text back. Hannah had a pattern: tantrum, manipulation, sympathy. When threats didn't work, she played victim. She started whispering a different story, that I had emotionally abused her for years, that I'd always acted like I was better. She rewrote our history like it was a bad script. In her version, she was the brave, neglected child, and I, the cold, unloving one. But some people in the family were waking up. Uncle Dennis called me one night in a half-whisper and said he'd had enough. Jake texted a screenshot of Hannah's story, captioned with a line about resilience and it grows back stronger. The family was starting to split. I made a call to an auto auction contact and arranged for the Camry to be picked up and sold cleanly. No paper trail. Cash. I sent her a photo of the truck. Sold. The silence that followed felt heavy and strange. A peace. Not the peacefulness of harmony, but the peace of a job finally finished. Then came the envelope. No stamp. No name. My address, in handwriting too neat to be Hannah's. Inside, a copy of a note. Hannah's own writing. A draft where she'd confided to our parents how she'd planned to manipulate me, how she counted on my softness. The twist. Jake's handwriting at the bottom. "You didn't get this from me. I'm tired of watching you take the fall." I felt vindicated for a second, and then very small. The letter meant nothing if no one would listen. The next morning, I found the spare key missing from the fake rock by the garden. My dad had taken it at 2:48 a.m. on camera, no explanation. The family still had access to parts of my life I wanted closed. So I began to prepare. New locks, reinforced deadbolts, smart cams for the backyard. I paid extra to have a locksmith that afternoon. The clicking of new keys felt symbolic. This time I was the one deciding who passed through my door. That evening, I sat with the bank confirmation in my inbox and a cold cup of coffee. I felt a small, dangerous calm. They thought the problem was a car. The problem had always been control. Who got to call what was normal in our family? Who got to use emotion as leverage? Who got to be forgiven? I closed a chapter the way someone cuts off a repeating infection, not with fire, but with precision. There is a line people draw between right and wrong in families. And in our house, that line had always shifted toward the loudest voice. For the first time in a while, it shifted toward me. I slept poorly that night, not panicked, not proud, just alert. There was a text at 2:15 a.m. "You'll regret this." Different tires had been slashed before. Threats had a rhythm in our life. But I had installed cameras. I had changed locks. I had the auction receipt. I had the letter. I had friends who were done letting Hannah's versions become gospel. It's strange how loneliness can feel like both punishment and a gift. When you cut ties with the chorus of an entire family, you also remove the echo chamber. I felt lighter, if only because there were fewer people to defend. But I knew one thing with a certainty that tasted like metal: the silence that followed my actions would not be peace. It was a reckoning. And I was ready to do more than defend myself. For the first time in years, I had room to plan. When you grow up in a family where guilt is the native language, silence is never peace. It's an omen. The morning after I closed the credit line and repossessed the Camry, the house was unusually quiet. Even my phone seemed to sense the tension, vibrating only once, a single, reluctant buzz, before giving up. I made coffee, opened my curtains, and told myself this calm might last. I knew better. By noon, the messages came like a storm. Aunt Carla, "Sweetheart, your mother's worried. Call her." Dad, "I raised you better than this." Mom, "We need to talk. Now." And finally, Hannah, a voice message that began with soft sobs and ended in venom. "You think you're better than me because you've got your own place? You're pathetic. Enjoy your little victory." I didn't even finish listening. Deleted it. My coffee had gone cold, but the satisfaction of deleting something that toxic was its own kind of warmth. The next day, Jake called. He spoke quietly, like someone reporting from enemy territory. "She's telling everyone you stole her car, Lena." I sighed. Technically, it was never hers. "I know that. Uncle Dennis knows that. But your dad's repeating her version. You might want to brace yourself for a full family meltdown." He wasn't wrong. That weekend, my mother organized a family meeting, which, in our household, was code for ambush disguised as reconciliation. I arrived out of morbid curiosity. The moment I walked in, I could smell my mother's perfume and tension, both too strong. My dad sat stiffly in his recliner, hands folded like a man preparing to announce a verdict. Hannah sat on the couch, her eyes red but defiant. She was wearing a sweatshirt that said, "Empathy is my superpower." The irony nearly made me laugh. "Lena," Mom started, soft, pleading, "we just want this to stop. You've humiliated your sister." "By taking back something that legally belongs to me?" I asked calmly. Dad raised his voice. "It's not about the car, it's about how you did it. You embarrassed the family." I looked at Hannah. Did I? Or did she embarrass herself when she crashed the car, lied about it, and tried to make me pay for her replacement? Mom's tone turned brittle. "She's struggling, Lena. You know how she gets when she feels cornered," I finished. "Yes, I do." Hannah snapped. "You're so cold. No wonder no one wants to be around you." That landed like a dart. Not because it was true, but because it was recycled. A family line they'd passed around for years whenever I refused to play savior. I stood. "This isn't a negotiation. I'm not your lender, your scapegoat, or your emotional punching bag." And then I walked out. As I reached the front door, I caught sight of Hannah's smirk, faint but smug, the kind that said she thought I'd just proven her point. That night, Jake texted, "You might want to check Hannah's Instagram. She's posting about you again." Her post was a photo of the empty driveway with the caption, "When family steals from you, remember, karma's a better driver." Hundreds of likes, dozens of sympathy comments. I didn't reply, didn't defend myself, but I saved the post because I learned something crucial. When people build their power on lies, you don't argue, you document. 2 days later, I made a call to my contact at a local auto auction, a man named Caleb who owed me a favor. "The Camry," I said. "I want it gone. Cash sale. No trace." He whistled. "Rough breakup?" "Worse," I said. "Family." By Friday, the car was gone. Sold, paid, erased. That weekend, I got another text. A photo of Hannah at brunch, holding a mimosa, tagged, "Fresh starts and better cars ahead." She looked happy. Too happy. That's when I knew. She was planning something. And sure enough, the calm lasted 3 days. Then the news story hit. Hannah telling relatives that I'd emotionally abused her for years, that I'd controlled her finances, cut her off from the family, and used money to punish love. For years, I'd stayed silent when she told her dramatic half-truths because correcting her felt like wrestling fog. But now I had receipts. Every transfer, every message, every repair invoice I'd covered for her. Still, I didn't fight back yet, because for once, I wanted her to underestimate me. Late that night, Jake texted again. "She's getting worse. Telling Grandma you stole her car and her savings." "Her savings?" I wrote back. "She's never saved a dime in her life." Exactly. That's why it's working. I stared at the screen, feeling that familiar ache, the one that comes when someone rewrites your story and the world claps for them. The next morning, I found something in my mailbox. An envelope. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a folded letter written in Hannah's unmistakable loopy handwriting. It wasn't sent to me. It was a draft of a letter she'd written to our parents. "He's soft. He acts cold, but he's desperate to be liked. He'll cave. He always does." Except, of course, she meant me. At the bottom, scrawled in a different hand, "You didn't get this from me. I'm tired of watching you take the fall. Jake." For a long time, I just stared at it. My hands shook. It was proof, not of her cruelty, I already knew that, but of intent. She wasn't lashing out in pain. She was calculating. That night, I sat on my couch, letter spread across the table, and realized something. She'd built her power through pity. Mine would come from truth. So I began to plan. There was a family barbecue coming up, my Uncle Rick's annual no drama event. I wasn't invited. Perfect. Because this time, the drama would speak for itself. Family events have a strange way of turning into war zones, all smiles until someone reloads with gossip. Uncle Rick's barbecue was no exception. I wasn't invited, but Rick and I had an unspoken understanding. He was neutral by choice, not ignorance. When I called and asked if I could drop by to return his Tupperware, he sighed. No drama, Lena. I promise, I said. And I meant it. Because what I was planning wasn't drama, it was exposure. I arrived just before sunset. The yard was loud with laughter, the smell of grilled ribs thick in the air. Fairy lights swayed over long picnic tables. I could already hear Hannah before I saw her, that practiced, theatrical tone she used when she wanted an audience. She stole it, she was saying, her hand clutching her chest like a saint caught in tragedy. My own sister took my car and sold it. I'm still paying therapy bills because of it. People murmured, some sympathetic, some skeptical. I caught Jake's eye from across the yard. He gave the faintest nod. Now. I pulled the small Bluetooth speaker from my bag, quietly connected it to my phone. The music cut mid-song, and before anyone could turn, my voice filled the yard, calm, even, reading words that didn't belong to me. He's soft, he acts cold, but he's desperate to be liked. He'll cave, he always does. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Heads turned. My mother's wine glass paused halfway to her lips. I continued, word for word, reading the letter Hannah had written in her own handwriting. The same one Jake had slipped to me in that anonymous envelope. Every manipulative line, every confession of intent. When it ended, the silence was surgical. You could hear the crackle of the grill. I looked straight at Hannah. She was pale, eyes darting between faces. For the first time, she didn't have a script. Mom whispered, Lena, what is this? A letter, I said evenly. One your daughter wrote, one she forgot other people can read. Dad opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Hannah pushed back from the table, the chair screeching against the deck. You're insane, she shouted. That's fake. Jake stepped forward. I saw her handwriting. It's real. Hannah's gaze snapped to him, betrayal widening her eyes. You, he didn't flinch. You went too far, Hannah. My mother stood up suddenly, her voice trembling. Everyone, please, let's not do this here. But it was too late. The performance was over, and no one could unhear the truth. Hannah stormed inside, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Moments later, her car, her new used hatchback, squealed out of the driveway, gravel spraying like sparks. The yard stayed frozen for a long moment. Then Uncle Rick muttered, well, burgers are done. People tried to act normal again, but the air had changed. Conversations splintered into hushed corners. Mom avoided my eyes. Dad looked 10 years older. Jake walked over and handed me a cold soda. Wasn't expecting a speech, he said quietly. I smiled faintly. Sometimes people need help hearing themselves. He chuckled, then grew serious. You sure you're ready for the fallout? Been living in it for years, I said. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You win this time. No name. I didn't need one. I slept surprisingly well until my doorbell camera pinged at 1:17 a.m. A figure approached my porch, holding a grocery bag. It wasn't Hannah. It was my father. He looked around, then bent down and tried the doorknob. It didn't open. He stood there for several seconds, shoulders slumped, then walked away. I replayed the clip 3 times before saving it. The timestamp read 1:17 a.m. That was the same night he'd texted earlier. I don't want to be in the middle, but she's your sister. He wasn't in the middle anymore. He was in my doorway. The next morning, I installed another layer of security. New alarm system, reinforced lock. I sent a group text, short, final. No one is to enter my property. If you have a key, it's useless. This is not a discussion. Jake replied instantly. Finally. Uncle Dennis sent a thumbs up emoji. His first ever. My parents, nothing. Hannah, silent. A week later, Grandma called. Her voice was soft and uncertain. I don't understand everything, dear, she said, but I trust you. That one hit hard. the first gentle word from someone in months. For the first time since the war began, I felt something close to peace. But peace in our family was never permanent, because silence, I'd learned, was just the space between storms. And the next one was already forming. It's strange, the way peace feels when it finally arrives. Not triumphant, not loud, just still. For the first few weeks after the barbecue, I heard nothing from my parents or Hannah. No calls, no sudden knocks, no forwarded guilt messages about family unity. Even the family group chat went dead, replaced with the gray banner that read, "You left this conversation." At first, the quiet unnerved me. I'd lived my whole life surrounded by noise, people shouting over each other, accusing, crying, dramatizing. Silence felt wrong, like a missing heartbeat. But as days turned to weeks, I began to enjoy it. I watered my plants. I slept in. I cooked dinner without checking my phone between bites. Then, one Tuesday night, I came home to find a folded note wedged between my front door and the frame. No envelope this time. No handwriting I recognized. Just 4 words, scribbled fast. "Check your back gate." My pulse quickened. I walked around the side of the house. The latch on my fence was broken clean through. Boot prints marked the dirt, leading halfway into the yard, and then stopped. Whoever it was had tried to come in but left halfway through. My camera feed caught nothing. They'd found the blind spot I hadn't realized existed. I called Jake. He arrived 20 minutes later, flashlight in hand, scanning the yard like a detective from a late-night cop show. "You think it was her?" he asked quietly. I didn't answer, because if it wasn't Hannah, that meant it was someone acting for her. And somehow, that was worse. We found nothing else that night, but when I came inside, my hands were trembling. Not from fear, from exhaustion. The next morning, I upgraded everything. New fence latch, second motion sensor, brighter floodlights, and a camera hidden near the back steps. When the technician finished, he said gently, "You've got more security than most offices." I smiled weakly. "You've never met my family." Later that week, a Facebook notification appeared. Someone had tagged me in a post. It was Hannah again. A long paragraph written in her usual performative style. "Sometimes people turn their pain into cruelty. Some of us choose healing, others choose revenge. I forgive you, Lena, even if you'll never admit what you did." The comments poured in. "She's so strong. Proud of you for speaking your truth." I went through the same thing with my jealous sister. I scrolled once, twice, then closed the app. Jake texted 15 minutes later. "Ignore her. She's unraveling." "No," I replied. "She's rebranding." Because that's what Hannah did best, turn every disaster into a redemption arc that cast her as the misunderstood survivor. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, the first in months, and sat by the window, staring at the new security lights flickering across the lawn. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. I thought of Grandma's call, her quiet, "I trust you." That small mercy had kept me sane. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. My mother's voice. Cautious, shaky. "Lena, your father wants to talk. Please don't hang up if we call tomorrow. It's about Hannah." Something in her tone made me pause, not guilt, fear. The next evening, Dad called. I didn't answer. He called again, then again. Finally, I picked up. "Lena," he said, "she's in trouble." "Whose definition of trouble?" He hesitated. "She missed 2 credit payments. The bank froze her account. She's been calling everyone. She said you ruined her." I exhaled slowly. "I didn't ruin her, Dad. I stopped saving her." Silence, then quietly, "She's your sister." "And I'm your daughter," I said softly. "You never seem to remember that part." He didn't reply. When the call ended, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about all the times I'd been expected to rescue her, and how those rescues had only made her weaker. 2 days later, Jake sent another message. "Hannah applied for a new loan under Mom's name. Got denied. Credits shot." "How do you know?" "Uncle Dennis works at the branch. He said she even tried to use your address." I laughed, not cruelly, just tiredly. "She's consistent," I said. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just another tantrum. It was escalation, desperation disguised as chaos. The next morning, a small package arrived at my door. No sender, no note. Inside, a broken house key. Mine. The handle had been twisted, as if someone tried to force it into a lock it no longer fit. I stood in my doorway holding the metal shard, the quiet hum of the neighborhood around me. A breeze carried the faint scent of barbecue smoke from somewhere down the street. And I realized something. They weren't just losing access to my house, they were losing access to me. The door wasn't just locked, it was closed. For good. It's strange how the loudest part of letting go is the silence that follows. Weeks passed with no new calls, no new letters, no new midnight visits. Even Hannah's social media feed went quiet, like she'd finally run out of storylines to play the hero in. You'd think I'd feel relief. But peace has a texture that feels almost foreign when you've lived your life waiting for the next emotional explosion. I went through my mornings methodically. Coffee, emails, work, plants. I found comfort in small, controllable things. One evening, as the sun set over the porch, I opened my mailbox and found a plain envelope. No handwriting this time. Typed. Inside was a check. $42.12. The memo line read, "Gas money." Hannah. No apology, just that. I laughed. Quietly. Bitterly. The number was almost insulting in its precision. It wasn't a peace offering. It was her way of saying, "You didn't break me." But what she didn't understand was I wasn't trying to. I was trying to free myself. Later that week, Mom called. I almost didn't answer. When I did, her voice was soft, almost fragile. "Your father's been quiet," she said. "He doesn't know how to fix this." "You can't fix people who don't think they're broken," I replied. She sighed. "You're both my daughters." "I know," I said gently. "But I'm the only one who ever had to prove it." Silence. Then a whisper. "She misses you." I didn't believe her, but I didn't argue either. Because sometimes, silence is a form of truth too. A few days later, Jake stopped by after work. He stood in my doorway, arms crossed. "Guess what?" I smiled. "You look too serious for good news." "She bought a used hatchback," he said, "named it Karma." That made me laugh, for real this time. "Fitting," I said. "Yeah," Jake added, smirking. "Karma's got 3 different colors on the hood." We stood there for a moment, just laughing, the kind of laughter that comes after years of holding your breath. When he left, I sat on my porch steps watching the streetlights blink on, one by one. I thought about the years I'd spent being the quiet one, the reasonable one, the one who patched things up and paid the bills and swallowed the insults so peace could survive one more day. And then I thought of the locks, the new keys, the absence of their footsteps. Maybe peace wasn't supposed to feel grand. Maybe it was just this. An unlocked phone, an unanswered text, an empty driveway, and a life that finally belonged to me. I took the letter Hannah had written, the one Jakey had slipped me, and set it in the fireplace. The paper curled slowly, the ink fading into ash. That's when I realized something important. Revenge hadn't saved me. Boundaries had. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need the family's applause. All I needed was that quiet certainty. The kind that comes from knowing you survived their noise and built your own silence. The next morning, I drove to Grandma's. She was in her garden, trimming roses. When she saw me, her eyes softened. "Long time, my girl," she said. "I know," I whispered. We sat on the porch, sharing tea that tasted like forgiveness, or something close to it. When I stood to leave, Grandma touched my hand. "You did what you had to do," she said. "Sometimes peace looks like distance." I nodded. "It does now," I said. Back in my car, I glanced at the rearview mirror. The house grew smaller as I drove away. Sun glinting off the windows, gardens swaying in the wind. And for the first time in a long, exhausting stretch of years, I didn't feel watched, didn't feel owed, didn't feel trapped in someone else's narrative. Just free. When I reached home, I stood at my front door for a moment, key in hand. The lock clicked. Solid, satisfying. I smiled. This time it wasn't about keeping people out. It was about finally keeping myself in.